Does anyone else remember this picture floating around the internet on what Bungie's next Halo 4 game would be? I remember seeing this picture everywhere, often associated with the upcoming Xbox 720. You know, the system we never got. But even with that being said, there was a time where the future of the Halo franchise was shrouded in mystery. After the release of Halo 3, many fans of the series assumed that Halo 4 would eventually be made, but also knew that Bungie was wanting to explore different parts of the Halo universe as well. And while Halo 3 did have players finally finish the fight, the legendary ending of the game revealed that Master Chief's story wasn't quite over yet. Or maybe it was actually intended to end right there at Halo 3. Either way, prior to the release of Halo Reach, community director Brian Gerard shed some light to the fact that Bungie put in consideration into possibly making a Halo 4. Today we are taking a look back at what happened to Bungie's Halo 4 and why they chose to make Halo Reach instead. Let's go ahead and get into it. We all know that somewhere after the development of Halo 3, several different things happened in the industry. First, Bungie broke away from their parent company Microsoft to become an independent studio. They would continue to make more Halo games to complete their 10-year deal that they initially agreed upon, but somewhere around 2007-2008, during the development of what would become Halo 3 ODST, they would have to make a decision as to what game they would work on next and have it approved by Microsoft. While the team was working on ODST, the first Bungie Halo game not to be a part of the main story following Master Chief, a lot of the team came together to pitch several ideas for what would be their final Halo game. Gerard even pointed out that they strongly considered telling the story of Master Chief waking up from his cryosleep and going down that storyline with Cortana. But with the contract with Microsoft coming to an end, a lot of the team didn't feel comfortable to start a new arc for the Halo franchise that they wouldn't be able to see through till the end. Gerard also went on to point out that the team wasn't too interested in picking up another mainline game with all the baggage associated with it. And this statement from Gerard kind of made sense. Over the course of the Halo trilogy, there were so many recurring themes and symbols, along with a cast of characters that would need to be built upon, and to attempt to continue a concluded story while keeping those elements alive would be a very difficult task. If they chose to drop some of these elements that fans knew and loved, it wouldn't have felt like a Halo game. Also, the team was really liking the idea of telling stories that were completely self-contained. Halo 3 ODST was originally just going to be a single-player DLC that later became a fully fledged game just because the team was getting so excited about it. Had Bungie decided to pursue Halo 4, I think things would have been quite a bit different than 343's approach. Halo 4 likely would have focused more on the evolution of the Covenant, with the Brutes changing the course of the overall Covenant mission. Without prophets to lead them on the great journey, the Brutes trying to use their, no pun intended, brute strength for domination could have led to a really interesting narrative, especially since the Covenant was still in a civil war, with the Sangheili being aligned with humanity. Or at least something along these lines would have made the most sense, considering Bungie took so much time to put these shifts in motion in Halo 2, 3, and ODST. But with that being said, this story for a one-off game wouldn't nearly be as epic of what they did with Halo 3, and while it'd be great to see, it probably wouldn't have given us any closure in the same sense that Halo Reach did when Bungie departed from the Halo franchise. At the same time, the Halo trilogy at this point was already complete. Bungie told a story with a beginning, middle, and end. All the plot lines and symbols came to a somewhat satisfying ending, and while there was a legendary ending that kinda told players, yeah, there will be more from Halo in the future, it actually served more so as a nod to Bungie's other series, Marathon, than a cliffhanger for the next Chief adventure, as many people interpreted that end scene. Before Bungie made Halo, they had a series of PC games that were also a sci-fi shooter called Marathon, and while the game had pretty primitive graphics reminiscent to maybe a Doom game, Marathon was one of the first FPS games to have a thought-out story. Players took on the role of a security officer who is stranded in a ship far from Earth that is approaching a strange planet. The player must traverse a large ship called Marathon, access terminals to talk to the onboard AI, and fight off aliens that board the ship. Of course, this story takes place in a completely different universe than Halo, but the legendary ending of Halo 3 seems very similar to the premise of Marathon, almost as a nod to their original game. Before Halo 4 was ever even announced, my headcanon had Master Chief on the forward onto Dawn, going on somewhat of a similar story that happened to Marathon. It kind of was a thematic conclusion more so than an actual same universe or same canon. Like I said, it's not canon, but it felt very intentional for the sake of concluding the overall arc in the Bungie universe, as well as concluding Halo at the same time. And that's not even mentioning the fact that there were so many other references to Marathon literally everywhere in the Halo games. For instance, in Halo 3, there are hidden terminals spread throughout the game, and if you collect them all, you received an achievement called Marathon Man. If you collected 1,000 gamer score on the original Halo 3, you'd even receive the same security armor from Marathon. Like I said, not canon, but Bungie tied up Halo pretty well for them to have the option not to make a sequel and kind of also make some references to their old games. It felt like a full conclusion. At the same time, even if Halo 4 made sense to make, there were a lot of technical limitations also to be considered. One of the major elements that made the Halo universe work so well was the ability to feel immersed in a new world and to be able to explore the depths of the world. Halo 3 was filled to the brim with that type of content. The level designs were brilliant and fresh, the game was packed with weapons for each faction in the game, the humans, the Covenants, and the Brutes, and vehicles that were both old and new. They introduced some really cool vehicles too, like the Chopper and the Prowler, that showcased the uprise in power that the Brutes had obtained. Forge mode was also introduced that gave players a literal sandbox to play with all of the weapons and vehicles and features from Halo. If Bungie decided to go down the route of Halo 4, they would have to make a game that was bigger and better than what they already did with Halo 3. And with the game to release on the Xbox 360, the technical limitations were already starting to show up even in 2007. Fans would be outraged if Halo 4 came out and offered less than the previous game, right? Bungie actually came up with a brilliant idea on how to solve this issue with the next game having to be bigger or feel bigger and unique and still have the sense of exploration and newness. They came up with the idea to swap features from Halo 3 with new ones under the guise that technically Halo Reach served as a timepiece before some of the technology found at the end of the Human Covenant War was invented. Sure, Halo Reach removed the Chopper and the Brute Shot, but it made sense because at the time in the canon timeline, Brutes hadn't overthrown the Elites yet. It was the same reason that the assault rifle looked so different in Halo Reach than other Halo games, because technically for this time period, it was primitive technology. And it was the same reason that the Falcon was the replacement to the Hornet. They purposely used this time period in the Halo lore to leverage a balance in the sandbox in different ways that still stayed true to the lore and feel of Halo. The DMR was introduced and the BR was removed. It made sense that a single shot variant of mostly the same gun was used since the BR wasn't in Halo 1 and wasn't quote unquote invented until Halo 2 came out. It was the little things like that that allowed Halo to feel consistent within its own universe and not just dropping random items and weapons and vehicles whenever they randomly wanted to. Honestly, Halo had reached a level of excellence where, without extreme scrutiny, a Halo game could easily be left feeling empty. Halo Reach released to critical acclaim, and a year later, 343 Industries would announce Halo 4. And while Halo 4 did a lot of things right, making characters feel alive, and for the most part people enjoyed the game, a large portion of the fan base was turned away from the series soon after this point, because it was clear 343 Industries didn't hold on to the same attention to detail that Bungie once had. Key characters were removed, symbols and themes were forgotten in favor of trying to force a different thematic approach. Parts of it were good, and when things were done right, the game strided, but instead, it was often muddled down with a really forced narrative that was a little weird, and their thematic approaches and their timeline approaches just weren't consistent with the rest of the Halo universe. Instead of packing the game full of features, they seemed to remove more and put a lot of stuff that fans didn't even want. Where Halo 3 had 11 vehicles, Halo 4 had 7. Halo 3 had a variety of weapons from different classes, where Halo 4 introduced Create a Class and skins. Ugh. And with that, a lot of the issues arose from Halo 4 that Bungie wanted to avoid. Bungie concluded that doing the prequel was the best bet for them, not only to suit the needs of the narrative without having to cut corners, but also to make a multiplayer experience that felt full and explorative, and not a watered down version of what once made Halo good. In 2009, Bungie announced that Halo Reach would be their final game in the Halo franchise, while Microsoft silently began putting together 343 Industries and began early development on Halo 4 that same year. Ultimately, the reason Bungie chose not to make Halo 4 was because in their eyes, Halo 4 didn't need to ever be made. They probably knew that Microsoft would of course make a Halo 4, but when Halo 4 released, a lot of the same problems that Bungie avoided came onto 343 Industries. And while I'm quick to criticize 343 Industries, they were definitely in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. There was no way they could have made Halo 4 a perfect Halo game like the way Bungie had, because Bungie had planned everything out so critically from day one, and to open up a new narrative line, they were going to have to make some changes to the way that Halo worked. And while they pivoted to fit into what they thought would work, I feel like a lot of the key things that made Halo Halo were forgotten. And we'll be talking more about that later in an upcoming video where we'll take a look back at Halo 4 and see how the game holds up today and take a more overall in-depth look at Halo 4. So if you're new, be sure to subscribe. If you like videos like this where we cover the glory days of Xbox Live and the Xbox 360, be sure to turn notifications on, hit the like button down below, and let us know which Halo game in the comments down below was your favorite Halo game of all time. That's it for today, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video.